Welcome back to Insight, our discussion about concussion and brain injuries in sport. Still with me is the sports journalist Chris Scudder, and via Skype we're joined by John Hardy, a Professor of Neuroscience at the University College in London. Chris Scudder, you've reported on all sorts of sports, you've reported on the world of football, you've played a bit of football. What is the difference, do you think, between those old leather balls we heard about in our film and the modern ball?
That was one thing that jumped out at me there, having played, having seen. I knew Jeff Astle, English footballer from many years ago. I've headed an old football as a young boy, and the difference between that and the modern ball is total. They are much lighter, more velocity with the modern ball, but it's the problem at the moment we are with this situation. We don't know yet. There's no link formally between dementia and heading the old football. So there's a long way to go. I think the rugby situation, particularly the NFL situation, they're much further ahead at the moment. It's acknowledged there in the US with American football that there is a problem, and financially it's already worked its way through. $1 billion is going to be working its way through to potentially up to 6,000 players. Cases coming forward all the time. I think you mentioned also in the first half there, where do we go now with contact sports like American football when it comes to youngsters? They've already reacted. They already know there's a crisis potentially waiting to happen because parents are saying, our children are not going to play the sport. What they're doing at the moment, they've come up with a program called Heads Up, which effectively is going to change the nature of the game, where contact with the head is going to happen less often. It's very early stages yet with that program. It's only been initiated about a pilot about 5 years ago, and the initial findings are suggesting that there isn't too much difference anyway. So the bottom really could fall out of American football.
Imprecise, but look, I think we all, as it happens, are parents of various age children here, including John Hardy. Let me turn back to you. Knowing what you know, John, and the way your research has taken it, would you advise a child of yours, a grandchild of yours, not to head the ball in a game of football?
You know, I was one of my fondest memories is I was a terrible football player, terrible. Let me just say I had no talent. But one of my favourite memories is scoring a goal with the old football from a corner in Burnley in Lancashire. So, you know, I think that there is some pleasure, in this. I absolutely understand what you're saying, though. I think we have to be very careful with children, and I think perhaps the program that you talked about not having kids head the ball under 12 is the right thing to do. I think it would be a terrible shame, though, if we denied kids today the pleasures of these sports in any way, and I think that that's a danger too. We don't want to bring up a generation of couch potatoes. So we have to, I think, take a middle line. But of course, there's an issue, and you know, we have to look after our children and grandchildren. But I think we shouldn't overreact too.
Let me ask you about the incidence of dementia in the general population. We know more about it. It seems more prevalent. So some of these athletes who played these games, whatever they might be, may well be on course to develop some kind of dementia in later life in any case. Do we know to what extent these sports accelerate that process?
We don't know. I mean, I think we do know it does accelerate it, but we can't say how much. So in our study, we found that my memory is 5 out of the 11 had CTE. If you went into the general population of dementia patients, it would only be 1 out of 11. So there is an increase, definite increase, in these people who are, yes, have played football in the 1970s. There's a definite increase for sure. But because the numbers were so small, we can't really quantify it to the general population. That's the type of study that needs to be done.
I think it's worth mentioning, Martin, in the States, at Boston University, about a little bit further ahead in their investigations, there were 94 former American football players who had passed on. 91 had CTE. That was the real catalyst for the breakdown of what's come to pass now. Litigation has gone through. Massive changes in that.
Has it changed the game?
Well, at the moment, no, I mean...
The owners still want the teams to play. The television companies want to show the matches. There's no turn down in spectator numbers, as far as we can see, are there?
No, I mean, they don't know what to do, quite frankly, at the moment. I mean, there's a program called Heads Up in the States where they're trying to change the nature of the contact. It's the same in rugby. They're trying to eliminate head contact. Football, soccer, it's, as I say, we don't know yet because we don't know the link between dementia and contact with the ball. But I mean, let us say, the Jeff Astle case, we saw it in a report earlier, that was 15 years ago. A coroner reported, confirmed that he had died because of what he was doing as a job. Now we're getting other players, 4 members of the England World Cup 1966 squad. It takes this kind of exposure to bring it to public attention, which then knocks it forward and action is taken. Jackie Charlton, Nobby Stiles, Martin Peters, Ray Wilson, household names really, who have got dementia, and it is widely thought that there is a connection here. I should say, I was in the States a couple of years ago, and I was talking to a PE teacher there about what sports they do. He said, we can't play rugby because the parents won't let us. I said, why? Because of the contact. Okay,
so
NFL,
already an awareness in the parent body then.
Fine, they're wearing helmets.
Okay.
Completely missing the point that it was the contact within the helmet that is causing the problem. And within a year or so of that, the whole thing exploded. So we now know more or less what is happening. It's now how they impose some kind of change. You know, it's a can of worms, really.
John Hardy, let me ask you about how you care for a player during a match. I mean, look, if somebody, God forbid, breaks their leg or twists a muscle or something, it's very obvious the player cannot continue. Because the brain is hidden inside our skull, it is not obvious, surely in the space of the 10 minutes, 15 minutes that some sports now allow, for anyone to assess how badly damaged or not that brain is.
I agree, and I think that, well, I agree with everything the other speaker said. I absolutely agree with everything he said. I think that we have to be conservative. And of course, in professional matches, one would hope that they would behave better because there's many people, including doctors, watching the games and assessing the players. I would say that perhaps it's more problematic in pickup games, so to speak, where there aren't people watching. I agree that we have to be very conservative and if in doubt at all, make sure people come off. That has to be part of it. Let me also just say, though, to defend a little bit the Rugby Football Union here in the UK and the FA here in the UK, both of these organisations are trying very hard not to box themselves into the same position that the NFL did, and they're both trying to be proactive about trying to understand this problem. So they're both pushing forward a little bit on both, of course, being more aggressive in their matches and in terms of taking people off, and also in funding studies to assess, you know, what the long-term outcomes of players are.
John, thank you. Quick thought, Chris. They're up against a real upward slope, aren't they? Because the whole point about these games is the aggression, is the team sport, is giving your all for the team. And to wimp out, to you know, to paraphrase, by saying, "Oh, I've hurt my head," is completely counterculture, isn't it?
As John said earlier, players don't know when they're injured. They want to continue. That is part of the team ethic. But it's not in their hands anymore. If there's one change that's come in football, soccer, in Europe and around the world, and rugby union around the world, what we have now, a situation, pressure groups, the National Brain Injury Association, Headway, have come up with a slogan. It's concussion aware. If in doubt, sit it out, sit them out. In other words, when there's an injury, you're off. No argument, you're off. We saw in the report earlier players, you know, being led off the field. There was a time when coaches would say, "Oh, you're okay," you know, give them a pat on the backside and on you go. That doesn't happen anymore.
Simply does not happen anymore.
Let me tell you, I was with Bobby Moncur at the weekend, Newcastle United legend in English football, 72 years old, as other people around him of his age are suffering dementia. He doesn't have any symptoms, but he told me, day in, day out, they were heading that football, bang, bang, bang. And then one day, he broke his nose, he was telling me at the weekend. The coach said, "You're fine, son, you're playing again Tuesday night." That would not happen anymore. Things are changing.
Chris and John, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
We end our programme with the Insight Bite. This is a little something that we feel you should know. Now, as we've shown you today's programme, there's no doubt that soccer, football, is one of the most popular sports amongst youngsters. But one country where the national sport doesn't even require a ball is Slovenia. Boasting more than 70 hills, the country's terrain is ideal for ski jumping. If you've ever wondered just how the skiers master the skills to soar through the air of those high jumps, have a look at these pictures. Before they're allowed to attempt the mountain's death-defying gradients, young jumpers in Slovenia must first perfect their posture and technique in specially designed gyms, ensuring that when they do hit the slopes, that they don't do it literally and can safely land the aerial manoeuvres. That's enough energetic stuff for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.